Welcome to Simplifying the Complicated. In each episode, we'll get together with other professionals and have fun talking about trust and estate matters. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, lawgbs.com. Now here are the hosts of Simplifying the Complicated, Lori Bolander and Lauren Gallagher.
Hello, I'm Lori Bolander.
And I'm Lauren Gallagher.
Welcome to Simplifying the Complicated, where we talk about trust and estates. Today, we're going to simplify the complicated around some aspects of elder care, which can be terribly complicated. Today, our guest is Jessica Strick, a registered nurse and founder of Compass Care Services, LLC. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What do you do and how did you get into care management and working with elders?
Well, I'm the owner of Compass Care Services. I am an experienced registered nurse. I work with seniors and their families to identify ways to stay in home, to age in place, or to locate an ideal senior living community. I got into this. I started my nursing career as a hospice nurse and worked in the homes with a lot of families and recognized there was this huge gap of knowledge that nobody really knows what they're doing. Nobody knows what insurance covers, what options are out there. And I left that at one point and I went into work in a hospital as a case manager. And then I discovered even more that nobody really knows what they're doing and or how to manage the crisis. And so when I decided to leave, I wanted to start a business to be able to be out in the world helping families navigate these complex situations because it's not real Googleable information. It's really difficult to know what to do.
Yeah, I know. And in our practices, people, come to us sometimes and ask these questions. And of course, we're not the right people. We don't know these things either. And so it's great to have people like you that we can send them to get these questions answered because it can be very stressful. Not only just because you're, a lot of these times they're caregiving for the elder, but financially as well. So it's really great to have people in your field that do that and can be there for these families. Definitely. So when do you kind of come into the picture for people, and how do they find you, or why do they realize they need you, I guess?
So for the most part, I come into the picture in a crisis. I never really, most of my referrals come from other professionals where they will identify that the family does not know what their next steps are. We've had either a major decline or a shift in situation, such as the caregiver is no longer able to care for their loved one. The person has had a medical decline. And so we're trying to figure out how we can manage that and keep the life that we're currently having somewhat together. So unfortunately, I'm really hidden out there. I get mostly referral only, and it comes from other people that know that I'm there. There's not that many of me.
Yeah. And so there's kind of like two aspects of what you do, right? Like kind of the care management and helping with the family, and then also helping the family find a placement if it's determined they can't stay at home. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Most people want to stay home if they can.
Yeah. And so during that care management portion, do you kind of help them determine that?
Yeah, so I go to families' homes and I talk to them about everything that's going on, what resources they have available, what they qualify for if they can move forward with long-term care insurance, if they have Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid through California, if they have other resources available, and we'll talk about what they can put into it if they have the resources necessary to stay home, or if they have the resources necessary to move somewhere else, if it's necessary for them to go elsewhere.
Yeah, I know. And I've seen that long-term care insurance really like save the day with people being able to stay at home, or just even be able to preserve some of the assets if they do have to go to a facility, because it can really plug that gap between, what they have, what they are eligible for as far as benefits, and and it can really save the day on some of those situations. And I feel like it's changed over time too. It didn't used to be all that beneficial, and it's a little bit better now. Is that what you're finding with that long-term care insurance?
Well, I'm actually finding that a lot of the older policies, my clients who are in their 80s and 90s, their policies are very comprehensive. And nowadays, if any of us were to go purchase, those policies would not be nearly as comprehensive.
Mm,
They're difficult to access in that you need to be able to fund probably 30 to 90 days of your care up front before they will begin reimbursement. But if you can, they can be fantastic. Some of these policies don't even have lifetime limits on how much they will
Wow.
out.
wow. Yeah, that's great. And I've heard too that some of them have kind of like a life insurance component where, like, if you don't use the care, then your family will get like that money back through like kind of a life insurance benefit type thing. So
Yeah.
that makes it a little bit easier to swallow, because I know some of these policies can be it can be expensive to get this kind of insurance. So that kind of makes it a little bit easier.
How hard is it for you to deal with families where the adult children or the loved ones are saying mom or dad needs to go into a facility, but mom or dad is saying no way? How do you help them navigate that?
It kind of depends on the scenario. I will say that as a nurse, it is a little bit easier to have Jessica with Compass Care come in and talk to the client and say, I'm a nurse. I'm looking at you right now, and this is not a workable situation. We can't actually make this happen. That feels
Mhm.
very different than your kid saying, we want you to go to a home.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. It's
Yeah.
so beneficial to have that third party so the kids can just be kids. They don't have to be the person pushing mom or dad. It's definitely good to have that third party. It's helpful too. I've had some care managers in the past, some of my cases, that help educate the kids about like what mom and dad's situation is, because with the different kinds of dementia, there's some behaviors that can surface, and my clients are sometimes horrified. They're like, I cannot believe my father, this mild mannered man is, doing these things. And I'm like, because it's not him, it's the disease. And so being able to understand that. And of course, there's different life expectancies with different, dementias and things like that. So I find that's a huge role for you as well, is to come in and educate the kids on, what are we dealing with here?
Yes. As a nurse, I would say that my number one specialty was always patient education. It's really tough for people to know what's normal and what's not normal. And
Mhm.
a lot of what I do is almost all of my nursing experience has been with dementia and elder care. And so there are a lot of dynamics that people just don't understand, especially regarding memory impairments. We
Yeah.
lose our loved ones in a lot of different ways, and it's really tough on caregivers to know what to do.
Yeah, I'm sure you probably provide them with caregiver resources and encourage them to get respite and things like that too. I know when I talk to some of my clients that are going through the caregiving, whether it be for a parent or a spouse, I try to reiterate that kind of stuff too, because it can be very hard on them as well.
That's probably my number one coaching with clients, their families, is you've got to have an outlet, a support group, somebody else you can talk to, because it's very isolating and it feels very there's a lot of guilt involved, and it does just
Mhm.
weigh down a caregiver.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, So you deal with people, whether they should move to a home, whether they can stay at their home, and what are the big factors in that type of decision? I mean, obviously money is one, which we've talked about, but what are the other factors that go into that?
The two big factors that when I always look at whether or not someone can stay in home or needs to go somewhere else, it comes down to I usually look at it as dignity or safety. A lot of people, safety becomes an issue, especially if you have a loved one that is able to walk, able to wander. And you don't have the ability to keep them in a home. This is where we all see this on the news, that someone has left their home and we can't find them, and they're in the
Yeah,
streets.
that's a silver alert now. I think I see
Mhm.
those. Yeah.
It's becoming more and more common as we age in place. The other line tends to be dignity, where when we are caring for a loved one, where is the line that you feel comfortable as a caregiver? It's in-home care is financially cost prohibitive for most people, more so than placement tends to be. You're looking at in San Diego County, roughly $20,000 per month for 24-hour care in the home if you're paying it through an agency. And at some point, your loved one is going to need care at night. And if you aren't able to staff that, it will be you. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with aspects of grooming, aspects of toileting. And so once we hit that point where we can't really offset it with just caregivers alone, that tends to be if we're not there, maybe this is the time to move where we have staff and caregivers. It also becomes a huge load for a caregiver because if you've ever had a sleeping baby in bed with you, you never really sleep. You're always worried about that person in the house. And it wears down a caregiver very substantially to where them being able to have their loved one in a safe place allows them to sleep at night and take care of themselves in a way that they can't when they're at home.
Yeah. I know there's more and more facilities and they're so different, I think, from at least what, like, for me, my grandparents thought of. Like, all the old folks' homes were like horrible and overcrowded and not a lot of, one-to-one attention, or they weren't independent. They were all just like thrown in a room together. And I think they've changed so much, and there's so many different kinds of them and so many different communities now. So, it probably helps you when you're placing people to have all the different options. I mean, has that changed a lot in the last, 10, 15, 20 years?
Even since I've been a nurse, the places that we're looking at now are not what most people view as nursing care. People tend to think of senior living more like we would think of a skilled nursing facility, which is a step down from a hospital. It's not a living situation. Senior living is, there are places that I would live now especially if I could leave my kids here. Their dining options are fantastic. Their activities are on point. The staff that there is caring and able to meet the needs of someone, especially in your own home setting. A lot of these places feel more like you have an apartment and you're able to access services, but you don't have somebody in your room with you. You are able to live your life and have them come to you. They're fantastic these days.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I've gone out
different care, right? A lot of them have different levels of care, and you can segue when needed.
Yes. And last time I looked, there were 575 licensed senior living communities in San Diego County. There is somewhere that everyone will find that works for them. And not everyone will work for every person, but there's so many different types, and with care ranging from completely independent all the way through end of life. It's
some of them are really amazing, and I agree with you. I've gone to see clients at some of these, and I'm like, wow, I would move in here, and like, I got all these services right here, and you got the food's done, and it's just like, these are amazing.
Yeah, the bus picks you up.
Yeah, well, and it's nice, like you were saying, though, that they have those different levels of care. And I've had some, very independent seniors that are clients say, I'm just moving in there because I know I'm going to need it eventually. I've got my own apartment right now, and when I need to, it'll be there for me. And I always feel like, wow, that's really like a responsible decision. Because you see these families that struggle with, trying to move somebody or getting them out of their house, especially after like capacity has decreased, because then sometimes they're more combative about it.
And it's a lot easier to move when you're not in the crisis. That's part of it. When we're looking leisurely, you have so much better in the way of options than when we are in a hospital saying you cannot go home and you have 2 days to get out of here.
Yeah.
It's a totally different ballgame at that point.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm dealing with that in one of my cases right now, and we don't have anywhere for her to go quite yet. So yeah, it can really be stressful for everybody, and having, somebody to lead them through that process. Cause I know I've had clients in the past who are like, I don't even know where to start looking. Cause like you were saying about, the benefits, like Googling senior homes in San Diego, like, I mean, that it's just overwhelming, the results that you get. And there's a lot of kind of like paid websites, or they don't route you to the communities themselves. They route you to some other service that's getting money. So it's very complicated. So it's nice to have somebody that can just take the client's hand and walk them through the process.
Well, and I don't think people understand that there is some vetting before they will allow a resident to move in, right? I mean, they have to pass certain tests or, physical tests before they could move in or go to a certain level.
Yes. So when you move into all of these communities are licensed by the state of California, and they all have policies about what they will or will not do. And so there are some conditions that can't go to certain communities. One of my jobs, like you said, you can Google and find every community. And if you put your name in a browser, they'll even send you every single place will call you in San Diego, which is very overwhelming. But what I do is I go meet with my clients before I look at moving them somewhere. And so I talk to them about all of their needs, their social needs, their medical needs. And my job is to narrow down out of the 575 options. Let's look at 2 or 3 because they all blend together after a certain point. Because what I really like to do is make sure that what I'm finding you meets all of your needs comprehensively. They can manage you now through the end of your life. So we won't be moving again in 2 years once you're a little worse than you are right now, that you can be managed where you're at.
Yeah.
That
What do you
seems really.
find? Yeah, it's super important. What do you find to be like the biggest challenges in your role, just kind of generally with everything that you do? What do you face as far as your challenges?
Well, kind of, there's so many different challenges. We're finding that more and more people are not adequately prepared to move into senior living, whether or not be financial, whether it be from a paperwork perspective, not having adequate advance directives so that their loved ones can make those decisions if needed. Um, and also, more and more of my clients are having higher need medical issues where not all communities can take someone who is diabetic and has to use insulin. You have to have
Mm,
very specific communities. Things like that are becoming more and more common, and where it's workable. We can always find somewhere, we can find different things, but it does really help to have it really helps to work with someone who knows the differences and knows what we're looking at, because I am very meticulous when we talk about your medical care and what you need. That's probably my biggest concern right now is that a lot of people will go to the first place that they drove by outside their neighborhood and it looked really pretty, but they were there for about 6 months and realized this is not actually what I need. My needs are are too far outside of their guidelines.
yeah.
Well, we as estate planning attorneys, we want all of our clients, we want everybody on, on the planet to have proper paperwork. And we've seen with our clients how much easier it can be for their loved ones or for them themselves if they're doing it on their own to be able to sign themselves in, or their family to be able to register them into a care facility if they have the proper paperwork, powers of attorney, and healthcare directives and things like that. So from your point of view, do you feel that that's critical? Is that important?
Yes, especially so as most of my nursing experience is related to dementia, I have probably more clients with a dementia or memory impairment than many of the other people I work with do. And you find that there is a real small window on that somebody can consent. And if we've passed that and there's nothing in place, there's no powers of attorney, then it becomes a much more difficult process to have them moved into a community without their consent, without them being able to sign. That's where I
Yeah.
find it to be a huge problem, because then we are stuck in they're going to end up in a hospital because they can't be managed out in the world and
Yeah.
we can't make those decisions, and we look at conservatorships, and that's really
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, and that gets really expensive. I mean, I've done and I still do conservatorships, and when somebody calls and says, "Oh, I need a conservatorship over my mom," the first thing I do is probe into how can we avoid that, because it is not a fun process. It is slow. It's a stack of paperwork this big, therefore it's very expensive. And it takes a long time. And I mean, essentially, conservatorships are interesting legally, sort of, because it's it's the only court proceeding that the person is entitled to a jury trial, in probate. So every other probate matter is decided by a judge, but because in a conservatorship, we're actually taking away people's civil rights, the right to contract, the right to, consent to medical care, things of these. So they have a right to a jury trial. And I never had any that went quite that far, but we did have to have some hearings because, as you've probably experienced, the person with dementia sometimes is fighting that family member that they had previously appointed in their estate planning documents. So sometimes within this situation, they even have estate planning documents, but they're not thinking clearly. So it can be just really a total mess, and it's sad. I mean, I've had clients have to get conservatorships over their parents, and they're in court crying because it's not what they want to do either. They have to kind of air all the dirty laundry of mom or dad in front of the court, and it's just really, really unfortunate. And so, yeah, having that paperwork is important, but yeah, making these decisions and talking about when you're going to move and what the status of mental state is like really important for families to do as they go along.
Jessica, what would be kind of your standard process? So if somebody connected you with a family member, what would your next step be? Would you schedule like an evaluation at their home to go meet with them? What would be your next step?
So typically I first start off with a phone conversation to assess their needs as far as what do you think we are looking for here? What's going on? Then I like to see all of my clients in person. Sometimes this is not feasible just because of where they are, but I like to visit them in their home to see how they live right now, because it also gives me a great guideline for where they're going to be the most comfortable later on. And it also gives me an opportunity to do a somewhat informal physical assessment, because I will all the time have clients on the phone say, "Mom walks great." And I'll go watch their mom walk and she's leaning against the walls. And I'll think, that's not great. And so it gives me a little bit more knowledge, because when I'm moving somebody or if I'm developing a plan for them, I want to know what I'm working with. And we as family members are often in denial about that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But from that point, usually it's my job. When I was working for hospice, I was, my employer was my boss. And when I was working at at my hospital was my boss. Here, my client and their families are my boss. And so I get to help them figure out what is the plan that they want that is most within reason, that we have the resources to manage, that we are able to integrate. And I'm able to talk to them about, this is why this is rational or not rational. This is why we cannot achieve this based on what we have here, looking at the home. It's so much easier to do that if I've been in their house and actually spent time with them. And so I try to meet with them in their home to adjust that.
Right. And you've shared with me before that you are very well versed in insurance, many different insurance companies benefits, and you understand how to find out what clients have available to them, which I think is a special talent. I don't think everybody has that. And I think it seems critical to being able to direct them or give them options.
It's, I worked with a lot of insurance when I was working as a case manager, and it's different when you get a flyer in the mail, especially at open enrollment, as to all the benefits. But I've been able to see a lot of them in action to see what does it actually look like when we accept these HMOs or PPOs, what kind of things are really accessible. And I don't sell insurance. So it's great to work with families to talk to them about, here's my opinions, and these are my opinions, not because I want you to go one way or the other, but because I've seen how this plays out in an inpatient setting or a skilled nursing setting. And so it is really valuable to be able to have that information for families so they can access, again, a lot of this is just resource management, figuring out what they have already there and how can we put it into play.
That seems to be a massive deficit right now in our culture, is that we are uneducated, we're ill-equipped, we have this large aging population, everybody's busy, and nobody has the skill set, the information, the resources. So somebody like you is so valuable to just our loved ones, people like Lori and me who need a resource like you to share with our clients. It's pretty heartbreaking. We're pretty close to a lot of our clients. It's pretty heartbreaking when they contact us or their kids contact us asking for help. And we don't have we try to have all the resources, but we don't always have them. So having met you, I feel great about, this aspect. So is there anything else that you think Lori and me and other people in our profession could do to support our mutual clients, to support somebody like you?
The biggest thing is planning early. And this is, I'm largely, as far as case management, care management, I'm largely in the crisis. That's kind of my specialty. I work at the hospitals. I will work with your physician. I will work with wherever you are. But a lot of times prevention on that, or knowing where you'll go if this, then this, saves all of that. And so planning early, starting to recognize mom may need some help down the road. We're seeing some decline. We're recognizing that there's been a shift. Let's start to plan that now rather than when we are sitting in the emergency room. That is the biggest thing that I recommend all of the time. Plan it early, know early.
Yeah. And of course, that's our philosophy for our clients too. And sometimes they don't come to us early enough. But I have been lately with clients that, I've known a while, or even if they're just coming to me and they're kind of getting older, I'm starting to raise those kind of issues with them more often. Especially if they do come in with like a child or something, like, okay, there may come a time where you can't handle your affairs anymore, and you guys need to talk about that and get in touch with me so we can make sure everything's all in order. Of course, they'll have their general documents done and things, but that way, we're able to help them with that transition, which can ultimately help you and them. Them is the big thing, is to help the client, make this as easy as possible. But a lot of times we get kind of crisis situations as well, unfortunately.
And even in the crisis, there is still a lot that can be done. And
Mm-hmm.
when I have this term that I used to use in my head a lot when I would do hospice. I would work with families, and that's kind of as bad as it's going to be. We're looking at end of life, and I would always tell people a bad plan still feels better than no plan. Even knowing that this is not where we want to be. We don't want to decline. We don't want this to happen. But knowing that there are steps in place and we have resources available is still better than the complete unknown of we're just hanging here and hoping for the best. So
That's
even
a really good. That's a really good point. That's a
Yeah.
really good way of putting it.
it is so massive to feel like you have some resource. And so even if you're in the crisis, that's when I step in a lot of times. Even in the crisis, you can still find some level of peace and knowledge that there is a solution.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What's the most rewarding aspect of what you do? I can imagine there's a lot of them, but what do you see them as?
It's funny. It's the same here as it did when I used to do hospice. I was a Girl Scout, and it always is leaving a place better than I found it. Even if we are not getting the desired outcome, as far as we're not getting better, we're not staying at home. I still know that where I was helped them to feel better about the plan moving forward, and that it may not be perfect, but there is some strength in that. There is some comfort in that, and I love being able to do that for families.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it too, because some of these, I mean, especially when you have an aging parent or especially in hospice, right? Like the
Mhm.
end is probably death, which is obviously nobody's desired outcome. But to be able to help people, and that's one thing I think Lauren and I like about what we do, is when we're doing estate plans, or we're helping the trustee or helping the healthcare agent, like we're helping, we're getting, making things a little bit better and a little bit easier for people. So it's a good way to look at that. I think, because, with what you do and what we do, sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, you deal with that all the time. And it's like, yeah, but, we're, I think, making it better for people. Right.
Yeah.
It's an amazing field. I actually love it, and I used to get that all the time when I was nursing. How depressing is that? It's not at all. It's a
Mhm.
great gift to give someone choice, and how they decline to be able to
Yeah,
make that decision.
absolutely. Yeah, and you get to meet so many neat people that have done so many interesting things too. It's really just, all sorts of stories and history that you can get from these interesting people. It's really is a neat area to be in, I feel like.
Oh, I agree. I love
Um,
clients. I said, I agree. I love my clients. I want to be like them when I grow up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're so interesting. I had a lady yesterday that, she was like, "Well, I think she's like 80. She's like, "Well, I've been told I'm supposed to do this trust thing for so long. I guess I'm finally gonna do it." And she's like, "'Cause I'm gonna die." And she's like, "I gotta laugh about it." And I was like, "No, I love your love your humor." So it's fun working with them sometimes and meeting different walks of life. What can families do? I guess you kind of touched on that. Like, what can families do? Like, talk about it, be prepared. Is there anything else like you'd think wish families or the public generally knew about kind of this time of life and the things that you help with?
Or are there resources for them that people just don't know about?
There are
Outside of
so
you, outside of us.
there are so many resources, and especially with one of the I work with a few organizations specifically geared around Alzheimer's, because it is such in really supporting caregivers. There are so many amazing resources out there and people out there who want to make this an easier time. Support
Mhm.
groups, Alzheimer's Association specifically, they have a 1-800 number that you can call 24 hours a day as a caregiver when you are struggling with, I don't know what I should do here. There are support groups all over San Diego County, virtual, in person. There are, and again, hospice holds a place in my heart, just because that was one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. Hospices, they do a lot to support grief counseling, different levels of care. And I think that part of it is just utilizing those resources that are out there and knowing that there are people going through the same thing that you are. You do not have to be isolated. You do not have to feel like you are the only one going through this.
I think that's the struggle. I think people don't realize that, or maybe they're shame is a weird word to use there, but feeling like they don't want to maybe reveal their parents, dirty secret because it's been a secret that mom is declining, and but those children or loved ones need that support, and everybody needs to feel normalized, that it's a normal thing, and that there's, just like you said, there's other people out there who've been through that or going through it, and professionals who are there to help.
It is interesting that guilt is the number one response I hear from every caregiver, parent, child, whoever, spouse. And it is,
Mm.
we feel guilty that we are not doing enough. And I used to do a lot of advanced directives with families, more so the Pulse, the pink one that you put on your fridge. And I would always tell families, when you're filling out that paperwork or when you're making these decisions, you're not making a decision for your loved one. You're making the decision for them that you know they would make if they were able to. Because it is a
Mhm.
really guilt-filled experience to know that mom said she wants to be at home. And I always think, I guarantee that your mother, if she knew that this was killing you, that you were not sleeping, you were losing your family, your life, she would not feel that way. She just doesn't have the ability to see that right now. And the
Mhm.
same goes for a lot of these scenarios. Everybody feels guilty. It's such a normal experience to feel that way, and you don't.
Mm.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's so true. I mean, it's like because they always talk about mom guilt, right? You feel guilty of things you did for your kid, but it would be in the same way
Never.
reverse dealing with your dealing with your parents, right? And maybe even worse because you know that they took care of you.
It's never
Well,
ending.
yeah. Well, and you're usually trying to raise your own children, and do your own job, and at the same time care for your parent or manage the care for your parent. Maybe with the parent resisting all along the way, which
Yeah,
we hear a lot about.
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
So, it's a lot.
yeah. It's a
More and more
lot.
people are in that sandwich generation where we're caring for parents and caring for kids, and there is no caring for you when you're caring for everybody else.
Yeah. I know. And then all three of us are also caring for all of our clients. The term counselor at law, I feel like applies so much in our area of the law because there's just so much counseling that goes into like kind of the estate planning and family relations and who should I appoint as my trustee, and it's just,
Yeah.
a
Just
lot.
emotional support for
Mhm.
everybody. I know, Jessica, that's a large part of what you're doing every day is emotionally supporting people, families. And we do that too. And that also leads to, the reward for what we do, but it's exhausting. It's really, your heart just is so in it with your clients and your clients' families that it's a lot.
I think that's what
Yeah.
makes us good at our jobs oftentimes because our hearts are so in it, but it's also it can be exhausting.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, keeping up with it all. Well, I think we've kind of had a great discussion today and learned a lot about, what you do and how you can help families and some of our clients, definitely. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Jessica.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, and you can find Jessica at californiacompass.com. And you can find us at lawgbs.com. So again, thank you, Jessica, for being here. Hopefully everybody learned a little bit today about elder care and resources that are out there, and probably learned I should probably just call Jessica when this happens. So thanks for tuning in, and have a great day, and thanks again for being with us.
Thank you, Jessica.
You've been tuning into Simplifying the Complicated with your hosts, Lori Bolander and Lauren Gallagher. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, lawgbs.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.